Hello everyone, this is International Master John Daniel Bryant bringing you a tournament game analysis of a game that I played at the recently concluded Central California Open, a tournament which I tied for first in over the last weekend. So here's my favorite game of the tournament against a player named FIDE Master Aaron Gerbinski, a young improving player who's bound to become an International Master within the next year or two. So here's the game. I'm white, e4, e6, d4, d5. I play the terrace variation of the French defense, and he plays knight c6, which is somewhat of a rare move, but certainly a playable move, which I've seen before. Knight gf3, knight f6, e5, knight d7. And here I play c3, which is not the main move. The main move is knight b3. And with the move c3, I'm making the claim that my pawn certainly belongs on c3 to support my center, but it's not clear where this knight should be developed yet. So, but with the move knight b3, you're making the claim that it's not certain where the c pawn belongs, either c3 or pushing. You still have the option of c4 in that line in one move. So anyway, f6, bishop b5. He was attacking my center with three pieces, and I only had 2 pieces defending it. But with bishop b5, I'm eliminating at least one of those defenders by pinning his knight to his king. So then it's 2 against 2. F takes e5, d takes e5, a6, and well, now the logical continuation is bishop takes c6. And we get an interesting position. I have the better pawn structure here because he has doubled pawns and an isolated pawn, but he has 2 bishops to compensate for that. And furthermore, on the pawn structure, I have 4 pawns versus 3 on the king side, which means that my play, if I'm supposed to make a pawn play, a pawn break, it's going to be on the king side. Whereas with his 4 against 3 here, he's going to be try to make plays on the queen side. And seeing that I didn't have anything better to do, I castled here, and I keep my options open. And he played c5, and now I played queen a4. And so immediately I have this threat of queen c6, and you say, now wait a second, you just said you're going to play on the king side, and you're making a play on the queen side. But I'm actually planning to slide this queen over to g4 on the king side. So, but first I started with these tactical threats on the queen side, okay. Rook b8, and now knight b3, and now I have the idea of playing knight a5, knight c6, which would fork his rook and queen. And not only that, but it actually, if I was to put my knight on c6 right now, it would actually trap his queen because all of his queen's escape squares are defended. So that's that. Rook b5 is a vexing defense because if I was to play knight a5, then he hits me with knight b6, and to defend my knight I have to play queen a3, c4. I have to defend against this discovered attack with b4. Takes, reveals the attack again, and I'm losing my knight. So I remember this rook b5 move, I lost to it in a blitz game before. Not quite that, like that, but it's an unpleasant move to face if you've not seen it before. So I just continue with my plan, queen g4 now. And look at my development, by the way. I've already castled, and I've developed 2 knights and my queen, whereas he's only developed his knight and rook. So that puts me 1, 2, 3, 4 against 2. So that puts me 2 tempi ahead at the moment. And at this moment, he's forced to play queen e7 to defend this pawn. And I sensed that this was the moment to strike with c4. Which, 2 things can happen here. One, he moves the rook somewhere, like like just some random move, and I attack his queen, queen f7, take, e6, and I'm winning a piece. So that's not his best option. So therefore, he has to either take my pawn on c4 or pin the pawn to my queen with rook b4. So somebody asked me about rook b4, and the refutation to that move is knight a5, which defends my pawn, and it threatens knight c6. And he doesn't really have a good way of dealing with that. So my opponent played the best move, d takes c4, and I don't retreat my queen back. No, I take this knight, which is doing nothing, and reroute it to c4. And so now you'll see in a second here, g6, knight takes c4, that my goal of c4 has been accomplished, because now he's left with 4 isolated pawns, 2 of which are doubled, and by opening the c-file, I'm going to be able to launch an attack on the c5 pawn with my rook later on. So it's a nice target for attack now, and white has no weaknesses for the moment, while black does. So he plays bishop g7, and I played bishop d2. You know, the computer recommended that I play bishop g5, and then after queen f7 come back to d2, but of course I considered this, but I didn't see the advantage of putting his queen on f7 compared to e7, so I just went with bishop d2 right away. And the idea of this move is just to put my bishop on c3, where it over-defends e5, but that'll allow, when you over-defend your weak point, it allows you to move your pieces that are defending it freely. So by moving my bishop to c3, I allow my knights to move, which is very useful. And I don't have anything immediately here, so I'm just working on a long-term strategy of attacking these weak dark squares of his, which were created by playing g6 and e6. Now he has this weak f6 square, so if possible, I'd like to put my knight like to f6, but of course he would have to stay still. But anyway, let's go on with the game. Castles, bishop c3, bishop d7, knight fd2, bishop d5. So I was planning to reroute this knight to e4 if possible, but I can't do that now because this knight would hang. So I played f4, just further supporting my e5 pawn, now that my knight has moved out of the way. And his rook, not doing anything there, decided to retreat, and here I thought now his plan with rook b8 is to double his rooks on the f-file, putting pressure on f4, and then make some kind of pawn break like bishop h6 g5. And opening the game is really good when you have 2 bishops like he does. And not only that, but if my f pawn is forced to move, then it'll leave this e5 pawn vulnerable. So, well, I didn't have much to do anyway, but again, I'm over defending a weak square, so by putting this pawn on b3, now this knight can move again, since this knight's defended. And also, I was planning to reroute my bishop to a3 and attack the c5 pawn. So, knight b6, rook c1. So yeah, I'm planning to put pressure here. If he was to trade everything like this or something, I don't think this really helps him. He's still left with all these weak pawns, and I have no weaknesses. So I still think this is quite favorable for white. But he didn't do this. Bishop a8, so now he's planning, he vacated the d5 square for his knight. But I decided, okay, bishop e2, so planning bishop a3. Yeah, I decided at this moment, when he was putting pressure on f4, because, okay, if I was to make some kind of random move here, like h3 or something, then he plays knight d5, and he's attacking f4, and I don't have any way to defend it other than to play g3. And this is very unpleasant, because now my diagonal is really weak, and if he manages to play queen d7, queen c6, I'm pretty much dead meat. So I didn't want to create these weak light squares around my king. So that's why I decided to just get rid of this knight immediately, allowing him to fix his pawn structure. But when he fixes his pawn structure, it now allows my knight a beautiful outpost on d6. Yes. And he chose... It was actually possible for me to take this pawn, which I didn't even consider, because I thought that he's really active here, attacking b2 and g2. But I can actually just take this bishop. But I still prefer my continuation, where I keep my my positional advantages and long-term pressure, to this. So this was kind of clever for him to choose this moment to try and distract me from my aim, because once I get my knight to d6, I feel like I'm pretty much winning. Okay, bishop d5. Now I played rook d1. And the idea is that I have, if his queen were to move, say, to c7, then I have the possibility of sacrificing here. And
check.
Like, this could be very strong for me. Like, well, see, even though I'm down in exchange, the computer still puts me solidly ahead, 0.6. So that's the idea of that. Alright, but he played bishop g7, and now at this moment, we'll see. I did all this maneuvering on the queen side, right? But now you see the underlying strategy here, based on the pawn structure, where I have 4 pawns against 3, is now I'm going to make a pawn break on the king side with h4. And the idea is simply to play h5 next, and he doesn't have any good way of defending the g6 pawn, so he'd have to take it. But then, once this pawn moves, it allows me to push f5. And if my knight gets to f5, he's going to be in deep trouble. Deep trouble. So, I was expecting him to play h5 here. I wonder what the computer thinks. I just intended queen g3, which is pretty good. Yeah, the computer thinks it's pretty good. But queen takes g6 is also playable. I just thought, again, queen g3, I don't see anything immediate, because if I took on g6, it allows him to take on h4. I just want to leave him with this weak g6 pawn, the weak f6 square, the possibility of sacking this rook for the bishop. The threat is stronger than the execution, they say, and so I'm leaving him with all these things to worry about if I played queen g3 instead of queen g6. And the computer agrees with my move after thinking for some time now. But anyway, he didn't play h5, which is what I was expecting. He played king h8, and the idea of that move is once he opens up the file, he'll be able to move his rook here and exploit the open file. But there's a tactical flaw, which is after take, if he used to play rook g8 here, oh sorry, then he leaves knight f7 check available. And by the way, he would really like to get rid of this knight because it is such a thorn in his side now. He would like to sack the exchange, but anytime he sacks the exchange here, he's opening my bishop up to his king, and so that's a real problem. That's going to spell defeat for him. So he can't take it, and he can't live with it. He can't live with it. He can't live without it. And now I play f5, which was unstoppable. So now I got my knight to f5. Rook takes d1, rook takes d1. Not knight takes e7, because that would allow him to take my rook. Watch out, watch out. Your opponent also has the right to exist. He takes here, and then he wins my queen, and all of a sudden I can resign. So that would be quite an embarrassing, unfortunate blunder. But I didn't fall for such a thing. I take rook takes d1. And now, with my knight here, you see his queen and his bishop are forked. And once he loses this bishop, my bishop will just have free reign on his king. And that's pretty much over. Bishop e8. He would love for me to trade queens here and give up my initiative, but no, I play queen g4, queen c7, and bishop a1. And so the idea of this move is that I want to threaten to take here, queen takes, and after he takes the queen, I push my pawn, and, well, I'll just show that. Like, okay, he plays a5 or something. e6. So now, with my bishop on b2, he could have just taken it, but now with my bishop on a1, if he takes, now I take his queen. So my bishop's defended on a1, while it wasn't on b2. So bishop a1, he plays h5, trying to push my queen away, but just letting me into g5. King h7. There's many ways to win, but I just thought I'd bring my last piece into the attack here. Rook d6. And c4. I don't see how queen c5 check helps him, or queen takes c4, because they leave his g7 bishop undefended. So I just took the pawn. King h8. Interesting, if he played king g8, then I was planning to play g4, which supports my knight. And the idea... Furthermore, I'm bringing another piece of pawn into the attack. But if he takes here, then I play knight e7 check.
Check.
And now king h8 or king h7, I have queen h4 check. And see, now that the h-file was opened by his pawn moving, then this is going to be checkmate, because he has to block. That's checkmate. And if he played king f7, then e6 is checkmate, which is very nice. But he didn't do that. He played king h8. And I suppose g4 is still possible here, but I was pretty low on time here, and I saw an immediate and beautiful way to finish this game, and so that's what I did. You can take 5 seconds here, or pause your video, and see if you can find what I played. Alright, so I decided to play knight takes g7. And after queen takes g7, I play rook h6 check, king g8, and now the coup de grace, e6. And after queen takes g5, rook h8 is mate. So currently he's up a queen for a pawn, but he's down a king, unfortunately. He could have played rook f1, but it doesn't help him. The rook still covers the f8 square. So, I hope you enjoyed the game. Thanks for watching. If you like my video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.